How'd that happen?
Does it have timings on it?
No, it shouldn't.
Okay. So
We'll just go back to the top.
maybe your mouse is going rogue.
Is it in my pocket? No.
No.
I can turn it off.
All right. You're good. All right. You're ready to go as an artist.
Are you ready? Welcome to Evensong. It's really, really great to be back in the chapel again, and it be all legal and everything except for the Mass. Today we have Tim Morphew, and he's going to discuss his time on the Appalachian Trail. That's something I've always been interested in, and I think many of you have been too. Sitting back about halfway is his mother. Elizabeth is a resident here. Raise your hand, Elizabeth, so we all know who you are. There they are. Okay, she's a resident here. And the cookies today were sent by Tim's wife, who is Beth Sollenberger. So it's been a nice day for the Morphews here. Tim?
Good afternoon. I am Tim Morphew. I'm here because somebody heard that I had hiked some of the Appalachian Trail, and somebody thought that you might be interested in that. There's all kinds of conversations, all kinds of references in Scripture to wilderness. One of my favorite scriptures is the whole narrative of Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and you remember how they have the big contest, and Elijah wins the contest, and the fire comes down and burns up all the sacrifice of I need to be next to the mic. And it burns up the sacrifice, and Jezebel sends a note to Elijah and says, "Thus may God do to me also if I don't make your life like all those prophets tomorrow." And so he runs away. After just having won this big contest, Elijah runs away. And he runs for a long time, and he gets to the mountain, and he comes to a cave. This is 1 Kings 19:9. And he lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here, Elijah?" And it goes on, and this is where the earthquake and the fire and the storm and all that, and the voice comes again. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Well, maybe I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I was doing in the Appalachian Trail. So, we have a few intro slides here. I'm really saying that the Appalachian Trail is now estimated more at 2190, and I need to switch around here a little bit. Pardon me, but I need to, I suppose I'm in the way of the images, aren't I? What am I going to do about that? I just need to be able to reach this, my laptop to advance the slides. So Laura's going to help me a little bit. So you can read all this if you want to. It says about 1,800 to 2,000 people attempt every year. Since the Bill Bryson book and the movie, there's some talk that it's more. They're encouraging people to do other ways of doing the trail so that sorry about that, so that people aren't all concentrated on the trail. But there's just some more information. I like to hike from shelters to shelter. That's the three-sided shelters it's talking about there. And there are lots of access points. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you that Beth is taking me, or we're going together down to Virginia later in the month, and I'm going to do what's called slack packing, and that'll be from access points along the Skyline Drive. They vary. There are some places where there aren't a lot of access points at all, but along the Skyline Drive, lots and lots of access points. Through hikers, section hikers, flip-floppers, I'm a section hiker. I didn't do it all at once. And I'll say a little more about that too. Now it's starting to go forward again without me wanting to. It talks about food. I'm not really going to talk about food a lot. I started hiking the Appalachian Trail in the summer of 2008 during my first sabbatical from Bethany Church of the Brethren. I'd read Bill Bryson's book. This is the wrong show. I'm sorry. I'm going to see whether I can pull up. Can you get me my PowerPoint options again? I'll keep talking. Or just go to the one that says Timbercrest Vespers.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Under the PowerPoint. That's, oh, yeah, give me Timbercrest 10.6. That one.
That's the one. Okay. So
Oh, there I am.
let's do
Okay.
the right one?
So that's another view of the trail, and that's really what it more looked like in the actual in the United States. This is from Springer Mountain. That's where I started out, and that's in Georgia. That's what most people do if they're going north to south to north. This is the actual rock at Springer Mountain, and there's a blaze on it, and there's a little slot underneath the rock where they have a trail register where you can sign your name. I forgot to sign the register. And this is the other end of it, Katahdin. That means great mountain in the native language. It's also known as Baxter Peak, and it's in Baxter State Park in Maine. Okay, I read that book like a lot of other thru hikers have, and thru hiker consensus is Bill Bryson's a really good author, not much of a hiker, but he inspired a lot of us to make the attempt, so he gets credit for that. I love the prospect of getting away, soaking my soul in the deep silence of the wild and green forests and raw ridges of the Appalachian Trail. Spending my days doing something so very, very different from my regular everyday life as a pastor. And the truth is, it was the best, cheapest way to get away when we had two boys at home and we were still trying to make a living and hold our life together economically. And I felt a real need to work on my spiritual and emotional health. I thought the AT would be a good place to do that. I only had 8 weeks of sabbatical time, so I really didn't have time to do the whole trail. To do the whole trail typically takes about 6 months, even for very young, strong, and healthy people. So I decided to do this section of the trail beginning in the Shenandoah National Park and walking as far north as I could in about 8 weeks. I parked a car at my wife Beth's home place in Everett, and on the morning of June 23, 2008, my father and mother-in-law drove me to a place called Rockfish Gap, Virginia, and I began to hike north. I must have gotten ahead of myself. Rockfish Gap. When I finished the trail in August of 2008, I thought I might be done with the AT. But 2 years later, in the spring of 2010, Golf Hiker, also known as Ragnar later in this presentation, is a guy that I met on the very first night out, my very first shelter at Calf Mountain Shelter, 2008. He's from Indiana, down around Richmond, and he's about the same age as me. And he wrote me to say he was going to hike the trail again, another piece of it, and did I want to go along? And I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, yeah, I think I would, and I did. And so I began to do sections with Golf Hiker in the even years. And then the trail kind of sort of found a place in my heart and soul, so that when spring comes around and I smell something in the air and I see things starting to get green, I start thinking about the trail. I start yearning for some quality time on the trail. And in 2011, I started walking. That's Ragnar there. And the other guy I'll tell you about in a moment. I started walking other sections of the trail in the odd years. And so now I have hiked, now 13 years later, I've hiked all but about 50 miles of the AT. And in a couple of weeks, like I said, Beth is going to drive, we're going to drive down together to actually a place near Camp Bethel, if you know where that is. Some do. And then I will be hiking that last 50 miles or so that I need. And Beth will be doing what's called slack packing me, which means I carry an almost nothing pack. This is what it is today. Instead of 20 or 30 pounds, it'll weigh 5 or less. And just carry my lunch and water for the day. And that way she'll drop me off in the morning, pick me up in the evening, and I will finish the last 50 miles of the trail later this month. The other guy there in the picture, you'll see again in a less fortunate circumstance. His name is Steve, or Pockets, and he figured very prominently in this 2017 part of my hiking because his wife came and delivered goodies to us several times and helped to transport us to places once we got up around Vermont and Maine, and made our life a lot better and a lot easier. I said I sort of found a place in my heart and soul, and it has been a healing, refreshing change from my everyday life. What does the trail do for me? It gives me distance. The closest parts of the AT are more than 500 miles away from here, and a couple of miles into the Appalachian forests takes me a world away from my normal everyday life. So hiking the trail does give me literal and emotional distance from everyday life. And it gives me in that perspective. And that's a good thing for me, because when I get outside of my routine and my ruts, and I think when we get away from our preferred and comfortable ways of seeing the world, we can see things that we never noticed looking from the inside out. Perspective. In the comfort of our own homes, our cars, our everyday routines, we can imagine that we're in control of ourselves and of our lives, and that we are masters of our fate, until some existential threat comes along to shatter that illusion. Fire or flood or tornado or sudden accident or health crisis. I'd say that a couple of days on the trail taught me that same truth. I am not, and you are not, the center of the universe. Furthermore, nature or creation is bigger and more powerful than any person, or anybody, or all of us, even. The mountains were there then, and they will be there probably after all of us are gone. Creation is bigger than any or all of us. And indeed, the weather will do what the weather wants to do. It can be unbearably hot, dangerously cold, whether we like it or not. However, I prayed. On the trail, we live at the mercy of the elements. On the trail, it's just you or me and the mountains and the woods and the sky and the sun. Just you, the hiker, and Mother Nature. And a few other people that you might run into along the way. The universe, you know, is a big, big place. And the forces of nature can bless or obliterate, bury a person. And both have happened on the trail. None of us are as great as we might imagine, which helps a hiker to remember that every good day is a gift. That's another view of Katahdin. And some other nature that I've seen. Every good day is a gift, and this is one of those songs that rang in my head sometimes on the trail. For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, for the love from our birth, over and around us lies. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the beauty of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of night, Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. The AT is a beautiful place with spectacular views and vistas, but the footpath itself varies wildly. It can be easy, like that. It can be smooth, or it can begin to get rocky. Or rooty. And as I said to Laura, really muddy this year. You may have heard, some of you heard me say, we were in Massachusetts and Vermont. Some people were calling Vermont Vermud. Vermud. Miserably muddy. Only a couple days into our 2021 hike this year, my hiking partner, Iron Pants is his trail name, slipped on a big rock, fell on his side, scraped his elbow, broke off one of his hiking pole tips, and cracked his cell phone screen really badly. Could have been worse. It could have been a 911 call. In the shelter that night, another hiker, Chardonnay, said, "That's the AT, rocks and roots and rain." Rocks and roots and rain. And this year, as I said, in Massachusetts and Vermont, mud. A lot of mud. They say, no rain, no Maine. I never really heard it, no pain, no rain, no Maine, but that was a slide I found on Google Images. No rain, no Maine. And that always comes to mind when I'm walking in the rain. Fortunately, I have a good rain jacket. Just a minute. A very nice rain jacket, which has done me very, very well many, many times. And I have a pack cover. And that's what it looks like before you unfold it. But it keeps the pack dry. And that's really important because when you get into camp at the end of the day, you'd really like some dry clothes and you'd really like your sleeping bag to be dry too. As a matter of fact, I came through some pretty serious rain just this afternoon, and I remembered the lesson again, how I love being in civilization when it's raining outside. I have walked in rain. Almost always, my core stayed warm and dry. I got wet, but it wasn't awful. The trail invites or challenges a person to ponder their perspective. You can let the rain or the heat or the rocks or the roots or the mud upset you, make you miserable. You can be mad about it, or you can try to see a bigger picture. When it rains, it keeps the bugs away. When it rains, it's almost always cooler. And after a couple days on this trail without a shower, a little bit of water on your head feels pretty nice. And the rocks can be slippery. And there's my friend Steve again. It's kind of mean for him to not be here to defend himself, but that really did happen. And it happens to all of us. All of us, all of us, all of us, even the 20-somethings, all of us. But a rock can also be a stepping stone or a climbing grip. And there are a lot of stream crossings and river crossings along the AT. And almost everywhere you can find that on purpose or by pure the goodness of nature and happenstance, there are enough rocks that you can step across that little stream crossing without getting your feet wet. In fact, I even saw stepping stones and roots and stuff that they had thrown into the mud bogs to make it easier to get through those without getting your feet completely muddy. And you know, in the scriptures, rocks have different meanings too, multiple meanings. It even uses that same language about stumbling stones and building stones. Jesus declares in Matthew 21:42, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone of what God is doing. It's a matter of perspective. Will we let rocks and roots and rain and mud upset us, make us miserable? Or will we try to see our journey and our day from a higher point of view? As I've said, and as I hope my pictures suggest, the AT is richly diverse and a beautiful place with spectacular views and vistas. But sometimes, too often really, I fail to notice or appreciate that beauty. Most of the trail is wildly wondrous. Yet as with the blessings of everyday life, it's easy to get used to everyday gifts and graces, to fail to notice, to fail to appreciate the powerful goodness of God's grace in every day. Sometimes when climbing up or working my way down a steep rock scramble, or when a trail is rocky or rooty or slippery or muddy, a hiker gets completely focused on watching their feet and where the next step will be. And you have to do that if you don't want to fall down. It's not like walking an Indiana road, I promise you that. But when you're focused on every footstep, it's easy to forget to pay attention to the beauty of the earth and the glory of the skies and the greenness of the trees all around you. Or at the end of the day, near the end of the day, walking 8 or 10, 15 miles with 20 or more pounds on my back, I would start anticipating counting down the miles until that next shelter or campsite when I look forward to taking off my pack and my boots. I won't take off my boots today. And relaxing. Many hikers have observed that the last miles you walk any day always seem longer than the first ones of the day. And I guess we know that's true even when you're driving someplace. But that destination, preoccupation, watching for signs of the next shelter or the next stopping place, has more than once stolen my attention away from the beauty of the trail and the lush green Appalachian forests, or the dramatic rock formations, or the sparkling streams along the way. I once heard a celebrity musician talking about the title of his latest project, as in, and the title was Now Hear This, but spelled like this, Now Hear This. And I found that a helpful reminder after hearing it, a helpful corrective when I realized that my attention has strayed. Now, hear this. What's happening in this moment? What is my awareness right now? What are my senses picking up about this particular place? Look around. What do I see? Open my ears. What do I hear? Take a deep breath. What's it smell like? Now, here, this. What can I receive from this moment, this unique moment in space and time? From the very first, when I first began thinking about hiking the Appalachian Trail, I wanted it to be a spiritual experience. I hoped that the hours of walking alone in the woods would be hours of meditation and prayer. And I did remember most every day to offer thought prayers and heart prayers for the well-being and positive, meaningful futures of my wife Beth and our sons Keith and Craig and the church and myself. And as I prayed for them, I began to wonder whether I had done my best for them. My prayers always keep driving me back to my role in things. Had I done my best, given my best, done all I could to enable them to have the best life they could? And as I wondered about those questions, I remembered times when I knew I had failed to give them my best, or be the best husband or father that I could be. So that summer, when we were at annual conference in Richmond, Virginia, Beth had a commitment, so just our sons and I went to the expensive restaurant in the expensive overpriced restaurant in the hotel lobby where we were staying, and we ate pricey hamburgers. And at that lunch with them, I was able to say something to the effect of, if there have been times when I have hurt you, I apologize. And they quickly answered, it was okay, all was well, I was forgiven. Maybe they just didn't want to sit in that uncomfortable moment any more than I did. But in that moment, I received kindness and grace. For the joy of human love, mother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends above, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Christ our God, we give to thee this our sacrifice of praise. For each perfect gift of thine, to our race so freely given, graces human and divine, flowers of earth and buds of heaven, Christ our God, we raise to thee this our sacrifice of praise. Folio S. Pierpoint. I want to give credit to the author of that hymn. Folio S. Pierpoint. Maybe you noticed that I have referred a number of times to getting away, wanting to be alone on the trail, and that's very, very real. And it's because I'm enough of an introvert to be quite comfortable and happy all by myself for multiple days. All by myself. And I did enjoy those days and nights of solitude, but even introverts need people. And I always happen to cross people. I guess that's a grace of God too. One reason is I can be nearly self-reliant, but not completely so. In fact, my very first day on the trail back in 2008, I forgot to fill up my water bottles or bladders before I said goodbye to my parents-in-law, and I hiked the 6 miles or so to the Calf Mountain shelter on a half a cup of Diet Coke and the water I sucked out of a puddle on a rock. I never made that mistake again, although I have run out or come close to running out of water a few times. And I have gratefully received gifts of water from trail angels who shared their water with me. Now, trail angels are people that do nice things for hikers. We call it trail magic. And trail magic can be a cooler of Gatorade and soda or fruit or apples or a container of granola bars, or sometimes a few places along the trail, people will put out full spreads and feed whole meals. whole meals to whatever hikers come along. You got to have a lot of food to feed a bunch of hikers. Even introverts need people sometimes, and the trail has reinforced that truth for me. I met golf hiker who I mentioned, the one that's turned sideways there talking to his pockets. I met him my first night out, as I said, at Calf Mountain Shelter. And it turned out we're the same age, and he's also from Indiana, and we hike similarly on it. And so it worked out that first year for me to walk and end up the same place with him for his 2 weeks out. And we have hiked together in 2008, 2010, 2012, and a major hike in 2017. I've probably walked almost half the trail with him, or at least connecting with him at the end of the day. My new hiking buddy is Iron Pants, and he's good for me because he has an amazingly positive and hopeful attitude through whatever may come. It is a journey, living life, trying to follow Jesus and hiking the AT, and there's always something new to notice, always new lessons to be learned or relearned, like I am not the center of the universe. The natural world and the world that God created and the God who created it are vastly greater than any of us or all of us. Perspective. There's always another way to look at things. Rocks can be stumbling stones or stepping stones. Pay attention. Now, hear this. What am I seeing and hearing and smelling and feeling right now? What's going on right in this moment? If you seek God long enough, God will probably show you that your best efforts will be spent working on your own stuff, your own issues, my own shortcomings. And people need people, even introverts. I don't think I could have made it to the end. And I've been there, that's the end, but I haven't done it all. So you take the picture when you're there. People need people. And I couldn't have made it to the end without the friendship and love of people who supported me and encouraged me along the way, and the grace of God that keeps me going every day. Thanks be to God.
Have you completed it?
No, I have 50 miles to go, 50, down right around Camp Bethel. Salt Pond Fork Road, up around Troutville. Is that your old stomping grounds? Kind of, sort of? Yeah. Yeah, Laura.
Can you say more about trail names?
Okay, sure. Trail names, I think they were proposed and encouraged partly for anonymity, really, for safety, because occasionally there are people you run into on the trail that you don't really want to see again. Now, if I had daughters, I don't, but if I had daughters, I would sooner send my daughter on the trail than I'd send her to Chicago. But one needs to be thoughtful and careful, and Laura mentioned that she has hiked some of the trail, and I don't know what her experiences were, but I know other people, in particular women, who have had some uncomfortable moments with guys, mostly, and there are some dangerous things that have happened, and some bad things have happened. So one of the reasons they encouraged people to adopt a trail name is so that they have something to call you, but they can't find you after you disappear from each other. And it's kind of fun. Sometimes trail names can be funny. There's always a hippie chick out there There's always somebody that's called Hippie Chick, and then, and they're all, Iron Pants was named Iron Pants because he does a lot of Iron Man marathons, and his uncle started calling him that. I just go by the name Coffee, and that's called defensive self-naming because I didn't want somebody else to give me a name based on some silly or funny thing that I did. And there are kind of some stinker names out there too, but that's what a trail name is. So I mentioned Chardonnay. This year we met a Jewel, whose real name was Turquoise, or was, something like Turquoise, and her real name was Jewel. That's how it was. So people use trail names partly just for anonymity and to keep themselves safe when they leave the trail, but also for fun.
Did you ever go alone?
So I started out alone, and I've walked lots alone, and I felt just fine with that. But I tend to find, you tend to run into other people that walk about the same pace. And there's sometimes this avoidance. So if you've seen the movie, in the Walk in the Woods, there's a place where the two try to avoid somebody they don't want to be with. And that happens. That happens some. But mostly, you find people that are congenial, and 95, 97% of all the people I've met on the trail have been wonderful, have been real gems of people to be with, and a joy. And one of the other things that I didn't include in this is my own issues with my own attitude, because sometimes I get grumpy. And again, when you're grumpy, you don't learn to appreciate where people are coming from and the special gifts that they bring. So, but yeah, I've walked a good bit alone, and people do that. Some people are guard their aloneness by making sure they stay in a tent. I prefer to stay in a shelter, and that puts me most evenings with other people, because the shelters are usually shared with whoever else wants to sleep there.
Fit in a shelter?
The smaller ones are probably 6. And then I've been in some that were pretty nice and pretty big. The newer ones are a little nicer, bigger. So some of them will hold 16 or more. Yeah.
The ones I stayed in, they were log huts.
Yes.
With an open side and just chicken wire. And I think 5 or 6 fit in.
Yeah, in Georgia, down where there's bear activity, they have ways of putting wire across the front. There's less of that I've seen lately. And yes, in fact, some of them were built by CPS. I'm sure some brethren men helped build shelters along the trail during those days.
It was 1953 when I was there, so that's a pretty long time.
Yeah, some of those shelters will have been replaced now, but yeah. The original shelters, in fact, I don't have a picture. I have a picture, but it's not here. They were built with logs even as the floor. Yeah. And the idea was that you hauled in leaves to lay on top of the shelter. But now they build them with real planks, and they're very, very nice, very comfortable. But there's a variety of kinds then? Yes, different designs, although they're basically open-sided on one side. So.
Well, there's some safety in that too.
Yes.
You can get out if you need to.
Well, that's the advantage of being in a shelter, and that's why I love being there. When it rains at night, you don't worry about anything getting wet when you're in a shelter. The tents anymore are really good too, so that's true too. So everybody has warned me about bears. For 2,000 miles, people have been worried about me and bears. I saw one bear my whole life on the trail, and I surprised it early on a Sunday morning, and he ran off the trail about from me to Laura, and he hunched over and huffed at me, and I walked by, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and we went our separate ways. I saw a moose, a moose cow, up in Maine in 2017, which just kind of ambled around in front of me. It was not a bit afraid of me. he was a lot bigger than me, and so I didn't have any reason to be afraid. And then see chipmunks, and people see snakes. There are rattlesnakes along the trail. Usually somebody warns me about it before I get there, or it's not there when I get there. Chipmunks, squirrels, lots of mice. That's the other thing about shelters. You get a few mice in the shelters sometimes.
Are there water supplies at the shelter?
Yes, they've designed the shelters to be, the plan is for the water supply to be, there to be one close most of the time. I have a book, and there are also now, there are books and guides that give that information. I also have an app on my phone now that gives really good information about that. Sometimes the water is a little far away, but they warn you about that ahead of time. And sometimes it dries up in a really dry year. So that was the other, I spoke about rain. If you get to camp and you don't have any water, that's not really a fun night. Because we cook with water and we drink water, and you don't really want to get dry. So rain makes that, rain is a good thing. It fills up the streams and there's water.
That's not still recording, is it?
I don't know what she's doing.
What time is it?
It's 20 till 5.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We have to go to supper? Thank you.
Thanks for having me.